The sun was slipping behind the distant hills when she tightened the last wire on the fence. Dusk always arrived quickly out here, spilling long shadows across the land and turning the prairie gold, then gray. She wiped her brow with the back of her sleeve and paused, listening. The wind moved through the tall grass like a low whisper, and somewhere far off a hawk cried as it circled home. This land had not been hers for long. Just a few seasons, but already it felt carved into her bones. The homestead was small, weather-beaten cabin, a lean-to barn, and this fence that never seemed to stay whole. Cattle from neighboring lands pressed against it, storms pulled at it, and time itself seemed determined to tear it down. Still, she mended it again and again, because giving up was not an option she allowed herself. She had learned to work at dusk because the heat faded then, and the loneliness felt less sharp when the day was ending. During daylight hours, silence. Could be loud? Too loud? It left room for memories of a husband buried on a distant ridge, of promises made and broken, of the long road west that had taken more than it gave. She bent to hammer a final post when a strange feeling settled over her. It wasn't fear exactly. It was awareness, the sense of being watched. Her hands stilled. The prairie had taught her caution, and she straightened slowly, eyes scanning the tree line beyond the fence. Nothing moved. Still, her heart beat faster. Stories traveled fast on the frontier. People spoke in hushed voices of Apache warriors moving through the land like ghosts appearing, disappearing, striking when least expected. Some stories painted them as monsters. Others as men driven by loss and survival, much like the settlers themselves. She had never known what to believe. She reached for the coil of wire at her feet, more for comfort than use. Then she heard it, a soft sound almost lost to the wind. A footstep, controlled, careful. She turned. At the edge of the trees stood a man she had never seen before, and yet, somehow, she knew exactly who he was. His presence felt different from any settlers. He stood tall and still, dark hair bound, back eyes sharp and unreadable. Leather and cloth blended into the colors of the land, as if he belonged to it in a way she never could. An Apache warrior, her breath caught in her throat. Every warning she had ever heard screamed in her mind. Run, hide, scream, but her legs refused to move. She could only stare, hammer hanging uselessly at her side. The warrior did not advance. He did not raise a weapon. He simply watched her as if weighing something unseen. A thin line of blood darkened his sleeve, barely visible in the fading light. She noticed it before she noticed her own fear. "You're hurt," she said before she could stop herself. The words sounded foolish the moment they left her mouth. Why would he care what she said? Why would he understand her at all? His eyes flicked to her face, then to the fence, then back again. He said nothing. The silence stretched between them, thick and dangerous. Slowly, deliberately, she set the hammer down. Her hands shook, but she kept them visible, just as she had once seen soldiers do when approaching strangers. "I don't want trouble," she said quietly. "This is all I have." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, to her shock, the warrior shifted his stance not forward, but back a single step. A sign of restraint. Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. The sun dipped fully below the horizon, and the world turned blue with twilight. Crickets began their song. Life, ordinary and unaware, continued around them. She realized then that whatever choice was about to be made by him or by her would change everything. This fence, this land, this quiet life she had fought so hard to protect, it all felt suddenly fragile. She had come out at dusk to mend what was broken. She had no idea fate was about to break something else entirely, only to remake her life in ways she could never have imagined. The twilight thickened, wrapping the land in a cool hush. Neither of them moved. The fence stood between them like a fragile boundary wood wire, and everything unspoken. She was the first to breathe again, slowly. She bent and picked up the water canteen she had brought from the cabin. Her pulse hammered in her ears as she straightened, careful not to make any sudden movement. The Apache warrior's eyes followed her hands, alert but not hostile. Pain flickered across his face when he shifted his injured arm, and this time she saw it clearly. The wound was deep, the blood dark and drying, You'll bleed through the night if you don't clean that, she said softly. Still no answer. But he did not turn away. That was enough. She took a hesitant step toward the fence, then stopped. The distance between them suddenly felt enormous, heavier than any wall. She lifted the canteen slightly, a silent offer. Minutes passed. The sky dimmed further, stars beginning to prick through the fading blue. Finally, the warrior reached out not toward her but toward the canteen. His fingers closed around it, firm but trembling. Their hands did not touch. He drank carefully, as though every swallow mattered. When he finished, he returned the canteen through the fence and gave a short nod. Gratitude, plain and undeniable. Something loosened in her chest. "My name is Clara," she said, unsure why she felt compelled to share it. Perhaps names made people human. Perhaps she needed him to be human. The warrior hesitated, then spoke a single word in a low, rough voice. She didn't understand it, but she understood the meaning. His name, a sound echoed faintly from the distance, hooves maybe, or the clatter of metal carried by the wind. The warrior stiffened instantly, eyes cutting toward the horizon. Soldiers. Clara felt the danger snap into focus. If they found him here, blood would follow, his or hers, or both. "There's a ravine east of the cabin," she said quickly. "Hidden by brush. You could wait there until dark." He studied her face, searching for deceit. Finding none, he nodded once. Before he turned to leave, his knees buckled. Without thinking, Clara rushed forward, catching his weight through the fence as best she could. He hissed in pain but did not push her away. For one suspended moment they were too close. She could smell smoke and leather on him, see the exhaustion carved into his features. "Stay," she whispered, "just until you can stand." She didn't know why she said it. Fear should have ruled her. Instead, compassion did. The warrior hesitated. Then slowly, he lowered himself to the ground on her side of the fence. The decision felt final. She guided him toward the barn, every step a risk. If anyone saw them now, there would be no explaining. Inside, she cleaned the wound with trembling hands, tearing cloth for bandages. He watched her carefully, saying nothing, enduring the pain without a sound. When she finished, she stepped back, suddenly aware of how close she was to a man she had been taught to fear her whole life. "Go before it's fully dark," she said. He rose, steadier now. At the door, he paused and turned back. His eyes held hers, intense and searching. Then he placed his hand briefly over his heart, a gesture of respect, and vanished into the night. Clara stood there long after he was gone. She didn't sleep that night. Every sound made her tense, every shadow felt alive. But when dawn came, the land was quiet, no soldiers, no blood, only a single mark near the fence, a sign pressed into the dirt. Deliberate and careful, a promise. She realized then that the line she had crossed was not the fence at all. It was the line between fear and mercy, and once crossed, there was no turning back. Morning came quietly, as if the land itself was holding its breath. Clara stepped outside just after sunrise, the cool air brushing her face. The prairie stretched before her in soft gold and pale blue, dew clinging to the grass. For a moment, she wondered if the night before had been a dream born from exhaustion and loneliness. Then she saw the tracks. Boot prints did not make those marks, nor did cattle or wild horses. These were deliberate, careful, barely pressing the earth. They circled the fence once, then led away toward the ravine she had mentioned. Her chest tightened. He was alive. He had listened. Clara followed the prints only a short distance before stopping. She wasn't foolish enough to chase after him. Whatever fragile trust existed between them depended on distance as much as kindness. Still, the knowledge that he was near somewhere between the hills and the trees changed how the land felt. Less empty, more dangerous. More alive. She returned to her chores, but her hands shook as she worked. Every sound made her glance up. A snapping twig, a bird lifting suddenly into flight. The world seemed sharper now, as if she were seeing it. For the first time. By midday, the distant rumble of voices reached her ears. Clara froze. She climbed the small rise near the barn and squinted toward the road. 3 men rode in from the west, dust rising around their horses. Soldiers, Their blue coats marked them clearly. Rifles slung across their backs, her stomach dropped. They pulled their horses to a stop near the fence. One dismounted and examined the broken post she had repaired the night before. Another scanned the tree line, eyes narrowed. "You live alone out here?" One of them, called Clara, forced herself to walk forward, calm on the outside, panic coiling inside her. "Yes, sir. Been that way since my husband passed." The men exchanged glances. "You seen any Apache?" The tallest one asked bluntly. Clara met his gaze. This was the moment that would decide everything. A lie could cost her life. The truth would cost someone else's. She shook her head. "No, sir, just cattle and wind." The soldier studied her face, searching for cracks. Then he straightened. "They move fast. If you see anything, you report it." "Yes, sir," she said. They rode off, leaving the dust to settle slowly back into the earth. Only when they were gone did Clara realized her hands were clenched so tightly her nails had drawn blood. That evening, as shadows stretched again across the land, she returned to the fence. Not to mend it, but to wait. She didn't know why she expected him to come. Perhaps she simply needed to know he was safe. The sky deepened into dusk, and just as doubt began to creep in, movement stirred. Near the ravine he emerged silently, keeping his distance. The wound on his arm was freshly bound, but his face was strained. He was not healed. Only surviving. She lifted a small bundle of food she had brought: bread, dried meat. Set it on the fence rail and stepped back. He approached slowly, eyes never leaving hers. This time, when he reached for the food, his fingers brushed hers. The contact was brief, but it sent a strange warmth through her chest. He spoke softly, gesturing toward the road, then toward the horizon. She understood without words. "Soldiers, danger." "I know," she said. "They came today." His jaw tightened. He said something sharp in low anger, frustration, maybe guilt. He looked toward her cabin, then back at her, shaking his head. She understood again. Being near her put her at risk. "You didn't force me," she said quietly. "I chose." The wind picked up, rustling the grass between them. For a moment neither spoke. Then he reached into a small pouch and removed a carved token symbol, worn smooth by time. He placed it on the fence, a sign of trust. Clara picked it up, feeling its weight. "What does it mean?" she asked. He touched his chest, then pointed to the land around them. Family, honor, protection. Her throat tightened. No one had offered her protection in a long time. As the stars began to appear, he stepped back into the shadows once more. Before he vanished, he paused and looked at her, not like an enemy, not like a stranger, but like someone who saw her, truly saw her. Clara stood alone as night fell, the carved token warm in her palm. The fence no longer felt like a boundary. It felt like a meeting place. And deep down, she knew this fragile connection, born in dusk and sealed in silence, was about to be tested in ways neither of them was ready for. The days that followed settled into a tense rhythm, like the quiet before. UNDERCLAP. Clara kept the carved token hidden beneath her blouse, close to her skin. She didn't know why she guarded it so fiercely, only that it felt wrong to leave it lying out in the open, where the world could touch it. Each morning she woke with the same question pressing against her thoughts. Would he return today? Sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't. When he came, it was always at dusk, never closer than the fence. Never for long. Their meetings were brief and careful, built of glances, gestures, and few shared words. He grew stronger, she could tell. His steps steadied. The strain in his face softened, though his eyes remained alert, always scanning the horizon. Clara learned small things about him without ever asking. He moved like the land itself, quiet, efficient, respectful. He never took more than what she offered. When she brought extra food, he accepted it with visible reluctance, as if pride wrestled constantly with need. In return, he gave warnings. One evening, he crouched low near the fence and pressed his palm into the dirt, marking shapes she recognized. 2 well horses, rifles, men. Then he drew a line toward the east. "Soldiers?" she asked. He nodded once. Fear curled in her stomach. The patrols were growing more frequent. Neighbors whispered of raids and retaliation, each side blaming the other. The land felt tighter now. as if the space for mercy was shrinking by the day. "You can't stay near here," she said quietly. "They'll notice eventually." His jaw clenched. He spoke a few words she didn't understand, but his meaning was clear enough. Leaving would mean crossing into dangerous territory, enemy land, hostile terrain. Staying was dangerous too. That night, Clara barely slept. Wind rattled the cabin walls, and every creak sounded like footsteps. She dreamed of fire, of fences burning, of shouting voices, of blood darkening the dust at dawn. She woke to shouting, men's voices, close. She rushed to the window and saw two settlers near her fence arguing loudly. One pointed toward the ravine, suspicion sharp on his face. "Tracks," he said. "Ain't cattle." Clara stepped outside, forcing calm into her voice. This land's always had wild movement. Wind covers tracks by morning. The men looked unconvinced. One leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You ought to be careful, Clara. Folks are talking. Soldiers, too." After they left, her hands trembled so badly she had to sit down. The walls were closing in that evening. She didn't wait by the fence. She walked to it. He was already there, watching her approach with surprise flickering briefly across his features. "They're getting close," she said urgently. "You have to go. Tonight." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head. She swallowed hard. "If they find you here, they won't stop with you. They'll burn this place to the ground." He said her name then, slowly, carefully, as if testing the sound. It startled her more than anything else had. He stepped closer than ever before. The fence now the only thing between them. He placed his hand against the wire, not crossing it, just resting there. His eyes held hers, fierce and steady. He spoke in low, broken English, words chosen with care. "Danger comes for both." Her breath caught. "Then go, live." He touched his chest. "Honor." She understood. Running without settling the threat felt like abandonment to him. To leave her behind, exposed, felt like a failure he could not accept. A distant gunshot cracked through the air. Both of them froze. The sound echoed, then faded, leaving behind a terrible silence. Somewhere far off, voices carried on the wind. The decision was no longer theoretical. "You saved me," she whispered. "You owe me nothing." He studied her face, then glanced toward the darkening hills. At last he nodded, slow, heavy with resolve. He reached into his pouch again and removed something larger this time, a leather band. Worn smooth, marked with symbols she didn't understand. He held it out through the fence. A deeper promise. Her fingers closed around it. The weight of it felt final. "When?" she asked. "Before sunrise," he replied. They stood there until night fully claimed the land, neither willing to leave first. When he finally stepped back into the shadows, Clara felt a hollow open inside her chest. She knew this was not an ending. It was a gathering storm, and when it broke, the fence, like every careful line they had drawn, would no longer be enough to keep their worlds apart. Clara woke before dawn to the sound of horses. Not distant this time, close, too. Close. She rolled from her bed and pulled on her boots, heart pounding. Outside, the night still clung to the land, the sky just beginning to pale at the edges. Voices carried, harsh, impatient. Lantern light bobbed near the fence line. Soldiers. Her breath came shallow. Before sunrise, he had said. There was no time left. She stepped onto the porch as one of the men dismounted. "Morning," he called, not bothering to hide the suspicion in his voice. "We're searching the area. Got reports of Apache movement." Clara forced herself to nod. "You're welcome to look." They didn't wait for permission. As the soldiers spread out, she scanned the ravine, praying silently. The grass lay still. No movement. No sign. Then she saw it, a shadow slipping along the tree line. Fast and low. He had returned. Panic surged through her. If he ran now, they'd chase him down. If he stayed hidden, they might find him anyway. She had seconds to choose. Clara walked straight to the fence and grabbed the loose post she'd meant to replace weeks ago. With a sharp pull, the wire gave way, collapsing with a loud metallic clatter. Every head turned. "Damn fence keeps breaking," she said loudly. "Cattle. Been pushing through all week." Two soldiers moved toward her, irritated, distracted. One cursed under his breath and bent to examine the damage. Behind them, the shadow shifted, then disappeared entirely into the ravine. Her knees nearly gave out. The search dragged on, but the urgency was gone. No gunshots. No alarm eventually. The soldiers mounted up, empty-handed and annoyed. "You're lucky," one said before leaving. "Next time you might not be." When they were gone, Clara sank to the ground, shaking. She stayed there until Dusk returned, unsure whether he would come again or if she would ever see him at all. Then, as if drawn from the earth itself, he appeared. This time he didn't stop at the fence. He crossed it. The broken wire lay between them, no longer a barrier. He stood only a few steps away, eyes dark with urgency and something else emotion she couldn't name. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered. "You broke the fence," he replied quietly. A faint, almost smile touched his mouth, gone as quickly as it came. He looked at the cabin, then at her, taking in the fear she could no longer hide. "They will come again." "I know." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. She did in single quotes. His hand hovered near hers, not touching. "Come." The word landed like thunder. "Where?" She asked, though some part of her already knew. "Where you are not alone," he said. "Where the land protects its own." Her chest tightened. Leaving meant abandoning everything she had fought to keep her home, her memories, the life she had built from ashes. Staying meant waiting for fire. She looked at the cabin one last time. The fence. The land that had never truly belonged to her. Then she nodded. She packed quickly only what she could carry. When she stepped outside, he was waiting, patient, watchful. He handed her a blanket, then turned toward the ravine. They moved fast, silently, the prairie swallowing their tracks. As night deepened, the land changed, steeper, wilder, alive with unseen eyes. At the crest of a ridge, she stopped and looked back. From the distance, her homestead was just a shadow against the stars. The fence was gone. He waited beside her. "You choose this," he said, not as a command but as a promise. "I know," she replied, and as they descended into the dark together, Clara understood something with sudden clarity. She hadn't been rescued. She had crossed over. The woman who mended fences at dusk was gone. In her place walked someone new, someone who had stepped beyond fear, beyond lines drawn by others, into a life that would demand everything she had, and the greatest trials were still ahead. They traveled through the night without speaking. Clara's lungs burned as the land rose and fell beneath her feet. Rocks cut through the thin solace of her boots, and thorn brush tore at her skirt, but she did not slow. The Apache warrior moved ahead of her, silent and sure, parting the darkness as if he knew every stone by name. Just before dawn, they reached a narrow canyon where the walls pressed close and the wind died away. He motioned for her to crouch beneath an overhang. From his pack, he pulled a small water skin and handed it to her. She drank deeply, then wiped her mouth, suddenly aware of how far she had come from the woman she'd been only hours earlier. "You must rest," he said. She shook her head. "They'll follow." "Yes," he agreed. "That is why we wait." The sun rose slowly, painting the canyon walls red and gold. For a moment, the beauty felt cruel. Clara hugged her knees, listening to the distant sounds of the land. Somewhere, far off, a bird cried, a warning, sharp and urgent. He stiffened. Horses. The sound was faint but unmistakable. The soldiers had found the trail. The warrior's face hardened, all warmth stripped away, replaced by calm readiness. He pressed 2 fingers to the dirt, reading it like a page. Then he looked at her. "Stay here, no sound." Before she could protest, he was gone, melting into the rocks, bow in hand. Clara's heart pounded as the minutes stretched. Sweat trickled down her spine. She imagined boots pounding stone, rifles raised, shouts echoing through the canyon. Then it happened. A sharp crack split the air. Gunfire, shouting followed. Chaos, horses screamed. Clara clamped a hand over her mouth. Fear threatened to freeze her in place, but she forced herself to stay hidden. She had promised. She would not break that trust now. The sounds moved away, deeper into the canyon. Then silence. Minutes passed, maybe more. She lost track of time, counting her breaths, praying. At last, he returned, There was blood on his arm again, not his, she realized, but someone else's. His breathing was controlled, but his eyes were fierce, alive with adrenaline. "We go," he said, "now." They moved quickly, doubling back, climbing hard paths that burned her legs and tore at her hands. Smoke began to rise behind them, dark and ugly against the sky. "They're burning the land," she whispered. He nodded grimly. "They punish what they cannot catch." By nightfall, they reached a hidden valley, green, sheltered, alive with running water. Figures emerged from the trees, boughs raised, then lowered when they saw him. Voices rose in a language Clara did not know. Some were angry, others wary. All of them stopped when eyes turned to her. The warrior stepped in front of her, speaking sharply. He gestured to her, then to his chest, then to the valley. A woman approached, older, with eyes like stone and kindness mixed together. She studied Clara for a long moment, then placed a hand on her shoulder. Clara exhaled for the first time in hours. That night, firelight flickered across the camp. Children watched her with curiosity. Men spoke in low voices. The warrior sat beside her, close enough that she could feel his presence, but not touching. "You are safe," he said. "For now," she replied. He looked at her then, not as someone passing through, but as someone who belonged to this moment. "This path is hard." "I know," he nodded. "You may leave when you wish." The words surprised her. Freedom, real freedom, not captivity, not obligation. Clara stared into the fire. She thought of the fence, the cabin, the life that had nearly burned behind her. Then she looked at the people around her, wounded, wary, human. "I'm not leaving," she said. Something like relief crossed his face. Later, as the fire burned low, distant flames lit the horizon. Her old land was burning, punished for mercy. Clara felt grief, sharp and real. But beneath it was something stronger, resolve. The soldiers had brought fire to the trail, but they had also burned away. The last thing tying her to the past. And tomorrow? She would wake not as a woman hiding between worlds, but as someone who would have to fight to survive in one she had chosen. The storm had arrived, and it was far from over. Morning in the hidden valley came with a different kind of silence. Not the empty, quiet Clara had known on the homestead, but a living one. Soft footsteps, murmured voices, the crackle of small fires waking for the day. She opened her eyes beneath a borrowed blanket and for a moment forgot where she was. Then she smelled wood smoke and heard unfamiliar voices, and the weight of everything she had left behind settled gently, firmly, onto her chest. She sat up. The Apache warrior was already awake, standing near the edge of the camp, speaking with two older men. Their expressions were serious. When they noticed her watching, the conversation stopped. She felt suddenly exposed. He turned and walked toward her. "They know soldiers burned the land," he said quietly. "They fear more will come." "I brought danger with me," Clara said. He didn't deny it. Danger was already coming. One of the elders stepped forward. He spoke slowly, his eyes never leaving Clara. Though she couldn't understand the words, she understood the meaning well enough. "Why is she here?" The warrior answered firmly, gesturing to her, then to the trail behind them, then to his chest. His voice carried conviction, ownership not of her, but of responsibility. The elder studied Clara again. At last he nodded once, a warning. "A condition. She may stay," the warrior translated carefully. "But she must choose," Clara swallowed. "Choose what?" "Us," he said, "or the past. There is no standing between." The truth of it struck her harder than any gunshot. There was no fence here to lean against, no halfway ground. Staying would mean becoming something new, learning new ways, accepting new rules, and bearing the consequences alongside them. That afternoon, she was tested. A woman showed her how to grind grain with stone. A child laughed when she struggled. An older man corrected her grip on a knife without a word. No one was cruel, but no one coddled her either when she faltered. She felt eyes on her, watching, waiting. By evening, her hands ached and her muscles screamed. She sat by the fire, exhausted, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. The warrior joined her, handing her a cup of warm broth. "They watch to see if you will run." "I won't," she said, surprised by the certainty in her voice. He studied her face. then nodded. As night fell, shouting rose at the edge of the valley. Runners returned with news. Soldiers had split into groups. They were sweeping the area, burning, pushing, forcing movement. Fear rippled through the camp. The elders gathered. Weapons were distributed. Children were ushered toward the deepest part of the valley. The warrior turned to Clara. "You must go with them." "No," she said immediately. "This is not your fight." She stood, heart pounding. "They burned my home. They would have killed you. They will not stop just because I hide." His jaw tightened. "You do not understand what they do to captives." "I understand fear," she said, "and I'm done letting it choose for me." For a long moment they stared at one another, the firelight dancing between them. Finally he exhaled sharply, "Then stay close to me, always." The soldiers came at dawn. Shots rang out as they entered the valley, surprised by resistance. The Apache fighters moved like shadows, fast, precise. Clara stayed low, exactly where he told her to be, reloading weapons, carrying water, doing anything she could. Smoke filled the air. The noise was deafening. A soldier broke through the line, rushing toward her. Time seemed to slow. She grabbed a fallen rifle, hands shaking, and fired. The man fell. The world went silent inside her head. She stared at what she had done, what she had been forced to do. Then the warrior was there, gripping her shoulders, eyes fierce but steady. "You live," he said. "That is enough." When the soldiers finally retreated, leaving their dead and wounded behind, the valley stood battered but unbroken. As the people gathered, the elder approached Clara once more. He looked at her hands, still trembling, then at her face. He placed a mark of ash on her forehead. Acceptance. That night, as the camp mourned and healed, Clara sat beside the warrior beneath the stars. The distance between them felt different now, not guarded, not uncertain. "You chose," he said softly. She nodded. "So did you." He reached for her hand, not as a claim, but as a promise. This time she held on. The fence was long gone. What remained was a bond forged in fire, choice, and survival. And whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. The valley healed slowly. After the soldiers retreated, there was no celebration, only work. Wounds were cleaned. Shelters were repaired. Lookouts were posted along the ridges. Survival, Clara learned, was not marked by victory cries, but by what endured the next morning. She helped where she could, her hands moving with new purpose. No one watched her with doubt anymore. The ash mark on her forehead had not been washed away. It was allowed to fade on its own. A sign that her choice was recognized but never forgotten. One evening, as the sun dipped low, the elder called her forward. The people gathered quietly. The warrior stood beside her, steady and unreadable. The elder spoke for a long time, his voice calm and measured, carrying the weight of memory and law. When he finished, the warrior turned to Clara. "They ask if you remain by your will," he said, "not because of fear, not because of me." Clara looked around the circle at the children, the women, the fighters, the land that had sheltered them all. Then she nodded. "I stay." The elder placed a hand over his heart and inclined his head. That night, the warrior led her to the edge of the valley, where the stars spilled across the sky like scattered fire. They sat in silence for a long time. My old life burned. Clara said finally, "Sometimes I still feel it." He nodded. "The land remembers fire. It also remembers what grows after." She turned to him. "What do they see when they look at me?" He considered the question carefully. A woman who crossed when she did not have to. Her throat tightened. "And you?" He met her eyes. "The same." From that night on, she learned their ways not as a captive, not as a guest, but as someone choosing every day to belong. She learned the land as it truly was, not divided by fences and deeds, but alive and shared. She learned strength that did not shout, and loyalty that did not demand. The warrior walked beside her through it all. Their bond was not rushed. It grew like roots deep, patient, unbreakable. When he finally took her hand before the people, it was with respect, not possession. Seasons passed. The soldiers did not return. One morning, Clara stood on a ridge and looked out over the valley, wind lifting her hair. She thought of the woman she had been, the one mending a fence at dusk, Believing that holding things together was the same as living, she smiled softly. That fence had been built to keep the world out. What it had truly kept out was her own becoming. When the sun dipped low, she no longer feared dusk. It was a reminder of choice, the moment when one life ended and another began. The Apache warrior joined her on the ridge. He did not speak. He didn't need to. Together they watched the light fade, not as strangers from different worlds, but as two people who had met at the edge of fear and stepped beyond it. And in that place beyond fences and fire, Clara finally understood. A life changed is not one that is rescued. It is one that is chosen.